There is a kitchen window in the house on Dellwood Avenue in Roanoke, Virginia, that faces east. My father had that window installed when I was 9. He said he wanted the morning light to come in while my mother made breakfast. She used to make eggs on Saturdays. She would stand at the counter in the blue bathrobe she wore until it fell apart, and the light would come through that window and land on the side of her face, and she looked like a photograph. That is the clearest memory I have of her, standing in that light. She left when I was 11, packed 2 bags and drove to Charlottesville and called from a payphone to say she was safe and she would be in touch. She was in touch for a while. Then she wasn't. By the time I was 15, it was birthday cards only. By the time I was 20, the card stopped. After she left, the window became just a window. It faced east. The light still came in. No one stood in it anymore. I tended the yard for 11 years after she left. I am not telling you this for sympathy. I am telling you because later, much later, on a Saturday morning in October, I would stand on the sidewalk in front of that house and watch a man named Leonard Price from Apex Realty drive away in a silver sedan, and I would think about that window, about the light, about the 11 years, about all the things that had happened in that house that no one recorded but me. My name is Cassie Merritt. I am 31 years old. I am a licensed title examiner at Holloway and Fenn Property Law on Jefferson Street in Roanoke. I have been there for 6 years. I know what deeds look like. I know what signatures mean. I know what a home equity line of credit looks like when it has been taken out against a property without the owner's full understanding. I know, better than almost anyone, what happens when a person signs a document they haven't fully read. My father did not know what I do for a living. He knew I worked in an office downtown. He knew I drove a used Civic with a crack in the rear bumper that I kept meaning to fix. He knew, or believed he knew, that I had nothing, no savings worth mentioning, no investments, no assets, no claim on anything that mattered. He had constructed this picture of me carefully over 31 years, and he believed it completely. My father's name is Donald Merritt. He is 63 years old. He has a voice that fills rooms without trying, and a handshake he has been practicing since the 1980s. He coached Little League for 6 years until the fees stopped covering gas, and then he stopped. He joined the Rotary Club and let the membership lapse after 2 years. He started 3 businesses, a landscaping company, a home improvement franchise, a pressure washing operation, and walked away from each one before it reached anything you could call stability. He is not a dishonest man. He is a man who believes that beginning something is the same as building something, and that the people around him exist to fill the gap between those 2 things. He is not a cruel man by nature. That is the part that took me the longest to understand, and the longest to stop being angry about. Cruelty, with intention, you can name and reject. What my father did was quieter than that. He simply never fully registered that other people had interior lives as complex as his own. To my father, I was a feature of the household, like the east-facing window. Functional, unremarkable, present when needed, unnoticed when not. My sister Tara was something different. Tara had his jaw and his certainty and his ability to walk into rooms and fill them without effort. She was loud in the way that gets called confident, decisive in the way that gets called leadership. My father looked at Tara and saw himself continued forward. He looked at me and saw my mother, quiet, attentive, always in the background, and my mother had left. I don't think he ever said that out loud. He didn't need to. It was in the college brochures he left on Tara's desk when she was 16, and never on mine. It was in the way when Tara called from Seattle, he would carry the phone into the good room and close the door behind him, and when I called from 15 miles away, he would answer while the television was still on and say yes and uh-huh, and well okay, Cassie, without ever turning the volume down. It was in the way he talked about Tara's career. She was a project manager at a tech firm, which my father described to his Rotary friends as running a department in the tech industry, and described my work as something with paperwork downtown, which was how he referred to it when he referred to it at all. None of that is why I am telling you this story. I am telling you this story because of what happened with the house. My grandmother, my father's mother, Ruth Merritt, died in March of the year I turned 26. She was 83 years old. She had a bad heart for the last decade of her life and a very good memory for the last decade of her life, which meant she understood exactly what was happening to her, and she faced it with the kind of steadiness that I have never fully been able to explain, except to say that some people carry their fear very quietly and some people carry it loudly, and Ruth Merritt never made a sound. She had lived in the house on Dellwood Avenue since 1974. She moved in with my grandfather when the neighborhood was still mostly young families, and the maple in the yard was barely taller than the fence. She stayed after my grandfather died of a stroke in 1997. She stayed after my father grew up and moved 8 blocks away. She stayed until she was 81 and the stairs became a problem, and then she moved into the room at my father's house that used to be a study, a small room with a single window and a door that squeaked when you opened it. She moved in with my father. Not with Tara. Tara was in Seattle, building something. Tara had sent a very nice card and offered to fly in for the moving day, but the offer had an asterisk on it. There was a quarterly review that week, and then a client trip the following week, and ultimately Tara had sent the card and a $200 Amazon gift card and a text that said, "Call me if you need anything." I was 15 minutes away, and I came every other day. I brought her meals on a proper plate, not a microwave tray. I drove her to Dr. Anand's cardiology practice on Piedmont Avenue every other Thursday and sat in the waiting room with a book and didn't complain. I sat on the back porch with her on the evenings when the weather was good and let her talk about my grandfather, about the house on Dellwood when they first moved in, about the summer when the maple dropped a branch through the garage roof, and my grandfather was furious for 3 days and then started laughing about it and never stopped. I did not look at my phone. I fixed the broken storm door on her room twice when the hinge came loose. I replaced the grab bars in the bathroom when the first set pulled out of the wall. I bought her the specific brand of peppermint tea she liked that the grocery store near my father's house didn't carry, and drove to the natural food store on Grandin Road to get it. I did not announce any of this. I did not send a group text. I did not mention it at Christmas dinner. I just did it, and Ruth Merritt noticed, and neither of us said much about it because neither of us needed to. My father was grateful in the vague, weightless way that people are grateful for things they never had to do themselves. He said once, "I don't know what we'd do without you, Cassie." He said it the way you say it, not the way you mean it. He said it and went back to the television, and I said of course and drove home. When Grandma Ruth died, she left a will. A clean, short will prepared by an attorney named Eleanor Cross at Cross and Delaney on Campbell Avenue, updated 3 months before she died. The will divided her possessions without drama. Some jewelry to Tara, the pearl earrings, the garnet bracelet for my grandfather's first Christmas gift to her, her silver serving set to my father, the photograph albums to me because she said, and she said it in writing in the will itself, which is the thing I have read more times than I can count, she said, "I leave the photograph albums to my granddaughter Cassie, because she is the one who actually looked at them and the one who understood what they were for." And the house on Dellwood Avenue. The house she had transferred to my name 14 months before she died. Let me explain the transfer carefully, because my father would later claim he never knew about it. That is not entirely false. But it is not entirely true either. In the year before Grandma Ruth's health declined in earnest, before Dr. Anand started using words like significant progression and options for management, she came to me one afternoon on the back porch with a question. It was late September. She had a cup of the peppermint tea. She said, "Cassie, I do not know what the tax situation is with the Dellwood house. Your father keeps telling me he is going to handle it, and he has been telling me that for 2 years and nothing has been handled. Can you look into it?" I was already 3 years into my work at Holloway and Fenn. Title examination is specific work. You pull property records. You trace ownership. You find the irregularities that other people missed. I am good at it. I have been told I am good at it by people who are not required to say so. I pulled the Dellwood records on a Monday morning. I found what I expected to find. The house had been in Ruth's name since 1974 with no mortgage, fully paid off, valued by the county assessor at $214,000, though comparable sales on Dellwood and the surrounding blocks put the real market value closer to $278,000. The tax history was clean.
No liens, no judgments, no complications.
Then I found the equity line. My father had, at some point in the previous 3 years, taken out a home equity line of credit against the property. Not his property. His mother's property. The line was for $48,000 drawn through Regional Community Bank on Peters Creek Road. He had Ruth's signature on the paperwork. She was 78 at the time. Her handwriting on that document is smaller and less steady than her usual script. The initials on the acknowledgement page are in her hand, but they are placed in the margin rather than on the signature line, which is the kind of thing that happens when someone is signing something quickly, or when someone is signing something they have been told is a formality. I sat with that for 2 days. I did not sleep well on either of them. On the third day, I went to my grandmother, and I told her what I found. Not all of it immediately. I told her about the tax structure first, about the options for reducing the estate burden, about how a properly documented transfer could clean up the situation before it became complicated. She listened the way she always listened, completely, without interrupting. Then she asked, "What else?" I told her about the equity line. I told her the amount. She said, "He took money against my house." I said, "Yes." She said, "How much?" I said, $48,000. She was quiet for almost a full minute. The yard was gray and still. The maple had dropped most of its leaves. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, the tea going cold, and she looked at the bare branches without any expression I could name. Then she said, "How do we fix it?" I told her. I told her that a documented transfer to a named individual, meaning me, which she had already understood before I said it, I could tell by the way she was looking at me, would remove the property from the probate estate entirely. It would settle the tax question cleanly. It would put the property in the hands of someone who had been taking care of it anyway, in all the ways that mattered. And it would mean that the equity line my father had taken out would no longer accrue against an asset that was no longer his to borrow against. She said, "And Donald?" I said, "He would be informed. He would be a co-party to the equity restructuring. He would sign the paperwork." She was quiet again for a moment. Then she said, "He won't understand what he's signing." I said, "He will be given full opportunity to understand. The attorney will explain it. He will have every chance." She said, "And if he doesn't pay attention?" I said nothing. She said, "Get me the attorney's name." The transfer was completed on a Tuesday in January, 14 months before Ruth died. We used Patricia Holcomb at Holcomb and West on Jefferson Street. I had worked across from Patricia's office for 3 years, and I knew her as a careful, precise woman who does not leave gaps in her documentation. The transfer deed is clean, witnessed, notarized, recorded with the Roanoke County Clerk's Office on the date of execution. The language is unambiguous.
No conditional clause.
No reversionary interest. No room for dispute. My name is in the grantee field. Cassie Lynn Merritt. Since January 14th. My father came to the signing because he was required to sign the co-party liability documentation for the equity line restructuring. Patricia explained the documents to him in sequence. He initialed pages 2, 3, and 5. He signed the acknowledgement page. She told me afterward that she had walked him through the transfer language specifically and that he had said he understood. She had his initials on every acknowledgement. He skimmed. I knew he would skim. He is a man who has never read a document through to the end in his life because he has always trusted that things would work out the way he expected them to. They usually had. Until they didn't. My grandmother died on a Thursday morning in March. The hospice nurse called me at 6:42 a.m. I was already awake. I drove to my father's house and sat in the kitchen and made coffee while he made phone calls. He called the funeral home on Melrose Avenue. He called his brother Gerald in Charlotte. He called Tara in Seattle. His voice was steady on all 3 calls. He is a man who handles the logistics of things well. It is the quiet things, the things that don't require a phone call, where he falls short. Tara flew in the next day. She was kind. She hugged me at the service and said, "I know you were there for her." I said yes. She said, "That meant a lot to her." I said, "I know it did." We did not have the larger conversation. We rarely do. My father seemed subdued for several weeks. He mentioned the Dellwood house twice in that period. Both times he spoke about it the way he speaks about projects, as something requiring attention, a decision to be made, a resource to be allocated. The house had value. That value should be doing something. He used the phrase doing something, meaning producing money for him. I said nothing both times. I let him talk. I listened to his plans the way you listen to someone describe a journey they are about to take and, quietly, that the road they are planning to take no longer exists. He listed the house on a Tuesday in September. I found the listing on my MLS feed on a Wednesday morning at 8:53 a.m. I looked at the address. I looked at my name in the county recorder's database. I sat at my desk at Holloway and Fenn for a few minutes and thought about the east-facing window and the morning light and 11 years of tending a yard that no one else tended. Then I called Patricia Holcomb. She already knew. Apex Realty had called her office that morning. Her paralegal had been very clear. Patricia said, "I assume you want to be present Saturday." I said yes. She said, "I'll send Marcus. He'll have everything." Marcus Holloway is 29. He has the build of someone who rose in the mornings and the expression of someone who has decided not to be surprised by anything. He is very good at delivering information in a way that leaves no room for argument. I did not call my father. I want to be precise about that choice. I could have called him Wednesday evening. I could have given him the chance to pull the listing quietly, to avoid the Saturday scene entirely. I thought about it for one evening, and then I stopped thinking about it. He had put a folder on the counter of a house he believed was his and said, "Vacate the room. 2 weeks."
No conversation.
No question. Just the folder and the deadline, and the assumption that I would comply because I always had. He had made a decision about my life, about the place that held my grandmother's last years and my mother's mornings in the window light, and he had made it the way he made all his decisions, quickly, without consultation, certain that his version of reality was the only one. He had taught me something over 31 years without meaning to, the power of the quiet decision, executed without announcement. I let him keep his version of reality until Saturday morning. I arrived at 9:45. I parked 2 houses down and sat in my car for a few minutes. White siding. Green shutters. The Apex Realty sign in the yard looked wrong in a way that I had to concentrate to understand. Not wrong because of anything dramatic. Just wrong the way it's wrong when you see something that doesn't belong in a place you know completely. Marcus was already on the sidewalk when I got out of the car. Dark jacket. Folder under his arm. Small nod when he saw me. There were already buyers on the street. A couple walking up the front path, mid-30s. She was looking at the roof line. He was checking his phone. A family with 2 young children climbing out of a blue SUV on the far side of the street. Another car pulling up behind mine as I stood there. Leonard Price came out the front door with a clipboard and saw Marcus. His face changed. He had known this moment was coming since his call to Patricia's office the previous morning. He had spent 36 hours hoping it would resolve differently. It had not. My father arrived at 9:58. I watched him park his truck at the corner. I watched him get out and look down the street and see the buyers and the sign, and the small cluster of us on the sidewalk. He walked toward us with the stride of a man who owns the situation. He had that walk his whole life. It had served him well. It was about to fail him completely. He looked at me. He looked at Marcus. He said, "What is this?" Marcus handed him the deed. One document. County clerk's stamp at the top. My name in the grantee field. He said, "The transfer was recorded January 14th. Your initials are on pages 2, 3, and 5 of the accompanying documentation." My father said, "I never agreed to this." Marcus said, "Mr. Merritt, you signed the co-party acknowledgement in the presence of Patricia Holcomb and her paralegal. The acknowledgement page specifically references the title transfer. Would you like to see a copy of that page?" My father turned to Leonard Price. He said, "This is our listing." Leonard Price said, "Don, I can't move forward. I should have done a full title search before we listed. That's on me. But I can't proceed with this." My father said, "There are buyers here." Leonard said, "I know. I'm going to have to speak with them." There were 41 people on that street. I counted later, the couple on the path, the family from the blue SUV. Two more groups that arrived while we were talking, the neighbors from number 614 who had come out onto their porch when they saw the gathering, the man from 610 who walks his retriever every Saturday at 10 and had stopped walking, the woman from 618 who had been gardening and was no longer gardening and was watching us over the fence. Leonard went to each group of buyers in turn. Quiet conversations. The couple on the path looked at each other, and then at the house, and then left without speaking. The family with the children was less quiet. The husband said something about wasting his Saturday, which was fair, but they left too. All of them left without going inside. My father stood at the curb. He said, "You had no right." His voice was different than it had been. Something had gone out of it. The room-filling quality. The practiced certainty. He sounded, for the first time in my memory, like someone who was not sure what came next. I said, "Grandma Ruth transferred this property to me 14 months before she died. She made that decision clearly and deliberately, with an attorney present, after reviewing the full documentation. I have been the legal owner of this property since January 14th. I have been looking after it since long before that." He said, "She was sick. She didn't know what she was signing." I said, "She knew exactly what she was signing. She asked Patricia Holcomb 3 specific questions about the language in the transfer deed before she signed it. Patricia can tell you what those questions were if you want to call her." He said, "This is my family's home." I looked at him for a moment. His hands were at his sides. He is a large man, my father. Broad shoulders. He has always taken up space as a matter of course, without thinking about it. Standing on that curb, he looked compressed, somehow. Reduced to his actual size. I said, "It is my home now, Dad." His girlfriend Carol was parked across the street in her silver Camry. She had arrived while Marcus was talking. She was watching my father with an expression I couldn't fully read from where I stood. She did not get out of the car. My father said, "I need to understand how this happened." I said, "I think you understand. I think Grandma told you when you signed the paperwork.
I think you chose not to take it in."
He didn't answer that. I said, "I'm changing the locks this week. When you're ready to have a real conversation, not a folder on a counter, a real one, where you actually listen, I will be here." I walked to the front door. I had the key in my jacket pocket. I had always had the key. I put it in the lock and turned it and went inside and closed the door behind me. The kitchen was quiet. The east-facing window was full of October light. It fell across the old tile floor in a long pale stripe the way it always had. The way it had when my mother stood in it on Saturday mornings in the blue bathrobe, the way it had through every year since, whether anyone was standing in it or not. I stood there for a minute. Just stood there. Let the light be light. Outside I heard my father's truck start. I heard it idle at the curb for a moment, maybe 30 seconds, maybe less. Then I heard it drive away. Marcus knocked a few minutes later. He handed me the complete documentation file. He said, "Call us if he retains counsel. Patricia's already prepared for it." I said, "Thank you." He said, "Your grandmother was a smart woman."
I said, "Yes, she really was."
My father retained an attorney 11 days later. A man named Culver from a firm on Franklin Road. Culver called Holloway and Fenn and requested the full documentation file. Patricia sent everything. The transfer deed, the initials on every page, the acknowledgement sheet, the recorded county stamp, the notarization records, the equity restructuring documentation with my father's signature in 3 places. Culver called back 4 days after that. He spoke to Patricia's paralegal. He said the case was not viable. He said it professionally and without elaboration, which is how attorneys say. My client has nothing. My father has not called me since October. I have not called him. Tara called from Seattle 3 weeks after the open house. She said, "Dad told me what happened." She said it in the flat voice she uses when she is deciding whose side to take. I said, "I figured he would." She said, "Why didn't you tell me about the deed?" I said, "Because it wasn't about you, Tara. It was about Grandma, and it was about the house, and it was about 11 years of showing up." She was quiet for long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then she said, "Are you okay?" I said yes. She said, "I believe you. I don't always believe you when you say that, but I do this time. It was the most honest thing she had said to me in years. I told her so. She laughed a little. We talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important. It was the longest conversation we had had in a long time. Last Saturday, I drove to Dellwood Avenue with a flat of winter pansies from the garden center on Williamson Road and a trowel I found in my grandmother's shed. I planted them along the east side of the house, in the bed where her garden used to be. The soil needed turning. It had been left alone for too long and had gone hard at the surface. It took a while to loosen it. The weather was cold and clear. The kind of Saturday morning that feels quiet in a way that isn't empty, just still. I was out there for about an hour. My knees were cold by the end of it. The pansies are small, purple and yellow, the kind that last into winter. They looked right in that bed, against the white siding, in the light that comes around the east side of the house in the morning. When I was done, I sat on the back step. I thought about my grandmother on this step, about the conversations we'd had here about my grandfather and the maple and the summer the branch came through the garage roof, about all the Thursdays I had driven her to Piedmont Avenue, and all the evenings I had sat here and not looked at my phone, about the document she had asked me to prepare and the questions she had asked Patricia before she signed it, and the way she had said, "Get me the paperwork," in the voice of a woman who had watched carefully for a long time and knew exactly what she was doing. She had given me this, not because I asked, not because I expected it, because she had been watching and she had seen what she saw, and she had decided. I sat on that step until my coffee went cold. Then I went inside and opened the east-facing window and let the morning in. When my father is ready to have a real conversation, the kind where he listens as much as he talks, the kind where he acknowledges that a deed with my name on it is not a clerical error or an act of confusion on his mother's part, I will answer the phone. I mean that. I am not interested in scorched earth. I am not interested in a permanent ending. I am interested in a different kind of beginning, one where he sees me clearly, and I don't have to arrange circumstances to make that happen. But the door has a lock now. It has always had one. I just finally used it. Type boundaries in the comments if you understand what it means to protect something you were always meant to have. There is something I have not said yet about the folder on the counter. My father put it down on a Tuesday evening in August. I was standing at the kitchen sink rinsing out a coffee mug, his kitchen, the house he lived in, 8 blocks from Dellwood. I had come over to drop off the mail that had been delivered to Dellwood by mistake, because the post office had not fully processed the address change my grandmother had filed before she moved in with him. 2 pieces of mail. I put them on the counter. He put a folder next to them and said, "Vacate the room. I've been working through the finances, and I need to move forward with the Dellwood property. You have 2 weeks to get your things out."
He said things.
As though what I had there were things. As though the garden and the repaired storm door and the Thursday drives to Piedmont Avenue were things that could be cleared out in 2 weeks and left at the curb. I looked at the folder. I did not open it. I picked up my keys. I said, "Okay, Dad." I said it the way I have always said it, quietly, without argument, in the voice I have been using my whole life when I have decided to let something pass that I am not going to let pass. I drove home. I called Patricia Holcomb the next morning. Not about the open house. Not yet. Just to confirm, again, what I already knew. She pulled the file and read me the recording date and the deed language. She said, "Nothing has changed. It's yours, Cassie. It has been yours for 1.5 years." I said, "I know. I just needed to hear it." She said, "Are you planning to let him find out on his own?" I said, "He already knows. He just hasn't believed it yet." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Well, when he believes it, call me." I said I would. And I did. 6 weeks later, on a Wednesday morning, when the Apex Realty listing came through my MLS feed, and I sat at my desk at Holloway and Fenn and looked at the address and thought, now, that is the thing about patience. It is not passive. It is the most active thing I know how to do. It is choosing, every day, to let the truth be true on its own schedule, to trust that the document exists, that the name on the deed is yours, that you do not need to argue or announce or prove anything to anyone. You just need to wait until the moment when the proof walks into the room by itself. The proof walked into the room on a Saturday morning in October in front of 41 people on Dellwood Avenue. I was already inside.